One of the most powerful and annoying mechanic in Dragon Ball Legends is something that many people don't like. Yes, I'm sure you already know what I'm talking about, the Rising Rush. This mechanic, labeled as a quote-unquote comeback mechanic, is something that has been at the peak of frustration for many players, which begs the question, why haven't they done anything about it? There's a few reasons for this, and so in this one we're going to go over why they haven't touched the Rising Rush mechanic, and also go over some possible solutions on how to make it a bit better to tolerate in PvP. So let's hop straight into it. Now I'm sure, you know, with players having played this game for well over 4 years, the built-up frustration with Rising Rush is definitely there. Me as well, you know, I get annoyed with the Rising Rush, and I'm pretty sure many people, their main annoyance with this mechanic is the fact that it's very heavily RNG, is very heavily luck-based, right? Because both players have to pick a card, and if the card is guessed properly, then you get to avoid it. If not, then your Rising Rush can go through, right? So it really lowers the skill level, because, you know, this mechanic just easily can kill any of your unit, right? It's such a powerful mechanic, and it can easily kill someone, and all that's stopping you from killing this unit is whether or not you get lucky or not. Now, obviously, there is a case where, you know, you can make a very educated guess. For example, let's say it's the start of the fight and you get an early Rising Rush, and if you notice, you know, your opponent hasn't used a blue card in a while, then, you know, picking blue card might be a good option to go with. Or let's say, you know, you have LF Frieza on your team, he generates blue cards, and you'll have extra blue cards in your hand, so that might be an educated guess, right? So there's that, but at the end of the day, it still comes down to if you can guess it or not, because even if you pick that blue card anticipating, like, thinking that your opponent has multiple blue cards, they can very easily just not pick the blue card, right? They might think it's an obvious choice or something, and it still comes down to a luck-based choice, which is why a lot of people don't like it, because it very greatly reduces the skill level in PvP. Already in this game, there's just so much RNG involved that having a mechanic like the Rising Rush further diminishes the skill level, and it was why a lot of people don't consider, you know, PvP to be that much of a, like, competitive landscape, right? Since there's so much luck-based factors involved in it. So like I said, this mechanic has been in the game for a long time. Many people have made multiple, I'm pretty sure at this point, multiple complaints on this. So why haven't they done anything about it? Now, obviously, this Rising Rush mechanic as a whole is not gonna go anywhere anytime soon. And you can tell the reason for this is because in a lot of these units' kit, Rising Rush is a factor in whether or not they get some sort of ability. For example, the latest installment of this, or the latest example of this, is Beast Gohan, or I think he's the latest example here, Beast Gohan. If we take a look at Beast Gohan's kit here, so applies the following effects to self when an enemy activates Rising Rush, activates once. Restores own health by 30, restores own health by 30 only once when it reaches 0. So basically, when an opponent uses a Rising Rush, this Beast Gohan gets endurance. So this also applies to units like Jiren to an even bigger extent, where Jiren gets a lot of buffs when an enemy activates a Rising Rush, right? So Rising Rush gets 40% damage inflicted, activates twice. So if he pops it twice, he gets 80%. 70% Q recovery activates twice. Card draw speed activates once. Restores, he gets endurance, and he gets nullified cover. He is getting the biggest portion of his kit when the opponent uses a Rising Rush. So if you remove this mechanic completely, this Jiren basically loses half of his kit, which is pretty insane, right? So that's one of the reasons, I'm pretty sure that's the main reason why they don't want to remove the Rising Rush in the game. It would just make a lot of units not function properly, right? Now, a very easy fix to this is, once these units get power crept, even after Zenkai or whatever, then they should just stop making units get buffs on Rising Rush, and then eventually these units will get power crept, and then, you know, it wouldn't matter as much. But right now, these units being more prevalent in the meta, Rising Rush does affect them to a certain extent. I will say that Beast Gohan having that effect, especially when he dropped, obviously Beast Gohan was literally the only thing you'd see in PvP. I will say that the amount of Rising Rush used during that meta was very low. It was I would say it was at a record low. People would really not use Rising Rush because they wouldn't want to give endurance to Beast Gohan, right? So people would still do it, but it was at a very lower degree than it was in prior years, right? We don't want to talk about the VB meta where he would just combo forever and then gain a rush, right? And I think that's also another big problem with I think that for me, that's personally my biggest issue with Rising Rush. Not only is it a luck based factor that I've accepted that at this point. It gets annoying still when when your opponent guesses yours and you're not able to guess it. That will always be annoying, right? But my biggest issue is when this mechanic is labeled as a comeback mechanic, but you have units that get their Rising Rush within 10 timer counts in the game. All these characters have like so much card draw speed, so much cover null that they're able to farm up a rush so fast and then use it immediately, and it just pisses me off. That's my biggest problem with this thing, because why are you labeling it a comeback mechanic? A comeback is when the odds are stacked against you, so you need this tool to somehow overcome those odds, right? But at the start of the match, the odds aren't stacked against you. You're already starting off. You're starting off on an equal footing. So why would you need that Rising Rush so early, right? And if I'm not mistaken, back when VB dropped, right, they had some nerfs to it. Not nerfs to him, but nerfs to the game mechanics just to kind of nerf him as a unit. That's how broken he was. One of them was the ability to cover change multiple times. Prior to him, you were only able to cover change once. So once you cover change once, you're not allowed to do it again. So that was a very easy target for people to rush, right? So if you notice your enemy cover change already, then you can easily just rush the unit. But if I'm not mistaken, a couple months even after, they noticed that VB just farms Dragon Balls way too fast. So what they did is they nerfed the rate at which you gain Dragon Balls, and so that would kind of make it so that Rising Rushes aren't used so early on in the game, right? But I don't know what happened to that. It's been like a couple years after that, and I see units. I don't know if they reverted the changes without telling anyone, but that seems like it didn't affect anything. Like those, I still get people. Literally, my video yesterday, or whatever you see this, like my video where I'm going, I'm using the movie saga team, Ultra Gogeta Blue Beast going. Literally, the first match, I start the combo off. It's like 10-20 timer counts in the game, and I get a Rising Rush. And I even mentioned it in the video that this shouldn't be the case. This is not how it should work, right? Like, I'm destroying this dude, and he needs the Rising Rush more than me. But guess what? I use it instead of him. Like, that makes zero sense. Zero sense whatsoever. So there's a lot of problems with the way that the Rising Rush functions in this game. And like, I understand that they don't want to remove it because of certain units kit or whatever, but I do think there needs to be some sort of fix to make it so that Rising Rush isn't so toxic or it's so stupid. It just doesn't make sense for how they even described the mechanic, right? So there are a couple things they can do. For starters, I do think they had this implemented in the LBR I think it was for like one of the older LBRs, like actually just a couple months ago, where they had the Rising Rush locked for the first 30 timer counts. So what this does is basically for the first 30 timer counts, 180 to 150 timer counts, the Rising Rush, you're not able to farm Dragon Balls and you're not able to get Dragon. I don't know if they were able to farm Dragon Balls actually. I think you might still be able to farm Dragon Balls, but you're not able to actually utilize the Rising Rush itself. Which I do think that's a perfect way to fix this issue with people getting the Rising Rush so early on. I don't know if I would still allow units to farm Dragon Balls, because then people would be, I mean, it depends. First of all, it's already restricting it for 30 timer counts. I would even push it to like 40 or 50, maybe. 30 timer counts is a good threshold there. That in itself is already a very big change. And I don't know if I would want to let them farm Dragon Balls. You would have to see how it worked, how test it out for a few games to really get a feel for it. But already right there, 30 timer counts is a really big plus. Another solution is to limit Rising Rushes to only being used once. Now, this could potentially be a problem. Well, it's not going to be a problem, but it could kind of interfere with how they made certain characters. For example, like I said, this Jiren gets 2 buffs for, he gets buffs twice, right? So you would need the opponent to use the Rising Rush twice for him to get his full buffs, right? Because he gets 40 twice, so 40-40 for 2 Rising Rushes, right? So it would kind of interfere there, but I personally don't think I think that's something we need to just sacrifice, right? I'm pretty sure people are willing to let go of Jiren for the greater good of having one Rising Rush per game, right? So that's another way they can just handle it. I do think that having the timer count restriction is much better than having the single Rising Rush use restriction, because you know, double Rising Rushes are decently common, but I do think that having early Rising Rushes is a bigger problem than having double Rising Rushes, if that makes sense. So limiting it to one Rising Rush is another solution, but I do think the 30 timer count or whatever timer count is a better solution. Now the final solution, I do think, honestly, I would say that having all three of these restrictions work in tandem, it would be the optimal solution, right? But just having some sort of restriction on it is always is good as well. But I do think having all three of these working together would be better. The last thing I want to say, which is this one is going to be probably the, I guess, least likely option, and it's to make the Rising Rush a guaranteed hit. No more guessing bullshit. No more, oh, pick a card, any card type bullshit, and then the enemy has to pick a card, and you know, if they guess it or whatever, then it goes through. None of that bullshit. If you use a Rising Rush, then it has to 100% go through and deal its damage. None of this guessing bullshit. Just make it so that the Rising Rush, when you use it, it's a guaranteed hit. It's a guaranteed whatever. Who cares? Like, if they have endurance or whatever, it's fine. That's all fine. That's a unit's kit, right? But make the Rising Rush go through. That would greatly remove the luck factor of the Rising Rush. Actually, it would remove it completely. Actually, not completely, just because the rate at which people get Dragon Balls is also RNG. Just like, it's so crazy how much RNG plays into PvP. But that's obviously going to change unless they want to fix that, but it's not that much of an issue. But just make it so it's a guaranteed hit. That would remove a big chunk of the luck factor that plays into Rising Rush. So just to reiterate the three things I want to mention. First, have a timer count restriction so that people don't farm Rising Rushes within the first 10 timer counts of the game. That's just so annoying. Second is just restrict Rising Rushes to only being used once per player. So once you use it once, like, the option should just fade away or whatever. And then the third one is to make it so that the Rising Rush is a guaranteed hit on your opponent. No guessing, nothing, guaranteed hit, and it's done. So that's what I would personally give as a solution. If I were to rank them in terms of priority, I would say the best outcome would definitely be the guaranteed hit. The second, actually, I would say the timer count restriction, for me personally, that would be the best outcome. Second one would be the guaranteed hit, and then the third one would be the one Rising Rush per player. In that order, I would want it, but ideally, all three of them working together would be the perfect solution to Rising Rush. Obviously, excluding the obvious option of just simply removing it from PvP, right? I do think we need Rising Rushes. It's a good tool for, like they said, as a comeback tool, and it's good for, you know, free-to-play players when they're going up against whale accounts, right? So it is a good mechanic. It's just not utilized properly, and it's not it's really not working the way I think they intended it to work. So that's gonna be the solutions that I have proposed for Rising Rush. Let me know in the comments what you guys would do to kind of fix the Rising Rush issue. Do you agree with some of the solutions I made, or do you have other solutions? I'm actually interested to know what you guys have to say, because they really need to do something about this. I don't think they will, but it would be so good if they did something. So definitely drop a comment letting me know what you guys have to say. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe, guys. It's so important, so don't forget. Other than that, have a great day. See ya.